Welcome to The Anthologist, where I review the myriad of anthologies in the horror genre. More often than not, anthologies are made of a mix of the weak and the strong. Well, after my review of the anthologies themselves, I'll perform the impossible and toss the weak areas onto my laboratory floor, keeping only the good bits to make the perfect anthology. They said I was mad at the Institute. The Monster Club is streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Roy Ward Baker and written by R. Chetwynd-Hayes, Edward Abraham, and Valerie Abraham. One of the odder anthologies of old is The Monster Club. It came long after such classic British anthologies as Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and Asylum. But the film still has British horror familiar faces like John Carradine, Donald Pleasance, Britt Ekland, Simon Ward, Stuart Whitman, Patrick McGee, and of course, Vincent Price. It was also directed by Asylum filmmaker Roy Ward Baker and ended up being his final picture. It also should be noted that unlike many anthologies today, The Monster Club was completely directed by one person, which in the end gives the film a much more even keel feel to it. That doesn't mean it's any better, but all of the segments really feel like they have the same tone and themes, which you can't say about a lot of anthologies today. The wraparound of The Monster Club is almost quaint, watching it now with a hungry vampire Erasmus, played by Price, seeking out a sip from a random passerby / famous horror writer / writer of this very movie, R. Chetwynd-Hayes, played by John Carradine. As a way to repay him, Erasmus brings the horror scribe to a secret underground bar called the Monster Club, where ghouls can hang out and dance while monsters mash to a handful of modern bands that represent the underground and experimental music scene of the UK at the time. It's all quite the graveyard smash. In the wraparound, Erasmus explains the genealogy tree of monsters, as all monsters are descendants of three types of classic monsters: the vampire, the werewolf, and the ghoul. Combinations of these creatures of the night are discussed, and I'm surprised more films haven't tried to use these various combinations to make new kinds of monsters in the horror genre. The stories of these anthologies are derived from examples of further down on the genealogy chart. It's interesting that this Monster Club would have a genealogy chart in it, given that it appears to be an underground club where different types of monsters cavort with one another while dancing, drinking, and partying. It's almost as if the chart is there to let the frisky monsters know what their various hookups might sprout, which in itself is kind of funny as well as a bit of a moralistic comment on the party culture as a whole. Story 1 tells the tale of a creature called the Shadmock, a lower-level monster with a gaunt face and a devastating whistle. The tale stars Simon Ward from Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed as a con man, and the Oblong Box's Barbara Kellerman as his accomplice, who attempts to seduce and rob a wealthy recluse named Raven, played by James Lawrenson, who happens to be a Shadmock. Though she is disgusted by his strange looks, Kellerman continues her ruse, not knowing of the Shadmock's devastating power. While the story is rather simple and predictable, I simply love the idea of a Shadmock, which seems more like a human version of a banshee. This segment also has a masked ball of monsters, a rascally cat, and some great melted face effects for its time. Segment 2 is called The Vampire, or From Beyond the Tombstone, which tells a goofy story of a vampire, played by Richard Johnson from The Haunting and Zombie, who marries a human woman, played by Britt Ekland from The Wicker Man, and has a child. This one's a pretty short and sweet cautionary tale for vampires, warning them never talk to men with violin cases. I won't spoil the reason why, but of course, 3 men, one of them Donald Pleasance, shows up with violin cases. Pleasance eats up the scenery and makes this one worth watching, but man does it end with a comedic plop. The third and last segment is called The Humgoo, and it features a story about the child of a ghoul and a human, known as the Humgoo. While this one is another predictable story, There are some great sets and more than effectively low-key makeup effects when a director, played by Stuart Whitman from Eaten Alive and Night of the Lepus, goes out to scout a location to find a desolate town to film his next horror movie. He happens upon the perfect setting, but it's a town that is inhabited by ghouls who have eaten all of the dead in the local graveyard and are famished for new visitors. This segment has some fantastic art by John Bolton, giving form to a tale told in flashback about the first ghoul to enter the town. The art was the highlight of this segment, that and the appearance of the always weird Patrick McGee as the lead ghoul. One of the more lovable features of the Monster Club are the pop musical acts between stories. The first is a pretty lame song by the Viewers called Monsters Are Okay, which reminded me a little too much of Tommy Two-Tone's Jenny 8675309. Things get better with B.A. Robertson, who sings A Sucker for Love, which was actually a solid song. Robertson went on to sing the infectious Bang Bang, which was a UK hit, and co-wrote The Living Years with Mike and the Mechanics. But my favorite song comes from the band called Night, entitled The Stripper, which talks about a girl being a stripper but maintaining her dignity. The song's set to a woman stripping off her clothes in silhouette, eventually taking off her skin, and finally becoming a dancing skeleton. The song rocks, and paired with the animated dancing skeleton, it's gold. Finally, UB40 provides the final song over the credits, but don't appear in the film. I have to give the Monster Club some credit for cashing in on the new MTV trend that premiered in the same year of its release by adding a musical aspect to the film. But it does feel like a bit of a cash grab to nab younger viewers to come see these old British actors try to scare you. The scares are sparse, and I wouldn't call The Monster Club a great movie by far. The budget is also very, very low, as evidenced by the simple Halloween masks worn by the monsters in the Monster Club. Still, I think I admire it more for the ideas that sprung into my head while watching it than the movie itself. Apparently, the real writer of the film was pretty disappointed that the movie veered so far away from his original tales. I might have to track those tales down. In the meantime, as an appreciator of old-school horror, especially British horror from the 60s and 70s, The Monster Club was a lot of fun, despite its lame comedy attempts and weak scares. CRYPTIDS is streaming on Screambox from Silver Springs Films. It's directed by Justin M. Seaman, Zane Hershberger, Robert Kuhn, John Williams Holt, Bret DeJager, Billy Bloody Bill Pahn, and Max Groan. And written by Zane Hershberger, Robert Kuhn, Jason Turner, Bret DeJager, Billy Bloody Bill Pahn, Max Groan, and Adam Hershberger. Joe Bob Briggs plays a DJ for a radio station that focuses on spooky stories. Tonight's broadcast focuses on the name of the movie, CRYPTIDS. This premise serves as a wraparound for 6 stories about local legends and rural monsters. Here's what each segment has to offer. Zane Hershberger, the cinematographer for The Barn 1 and 2, lets loose Scared about the Melonheads, the legend of the Appalachian inbred creatures with large bulbous heads that might have been caused by government experiments. Large noggined hillbillies indeed descend upon a group of campers in this gory, but by the numbers tale. I can't say the acting is great, but the effects are pretty solid, and the ending of this tale is nice and bleak. My favorite cryptid, Bigfoot, is the subject of The Forest Bridge, directed by Robert Kuhn, who did the effects for The Barn, 1031, and was the supervisor for the effects in this very film. Much of the action in this segment is told, and it's a bit disturbing at that, as it involves Bigfoot's less wholesome side of simply taking a mate rather than whining and dining her. Still, the Bigfoot looks good, with movable lips and face appliances, which is something you rarely see in Bigfoot films. This is another one that whizzes by quickly and painlessly. John William Holt, the director of The Dooms Chapel Horror, hands forth the Loveland Frogman in Frog Me Forever. This is a more comical tale about an over-the-top charter fisherman / cryptid expert who finds himself accosted by the legendary frogman that haunts the Ohio's swampland. It's goofy humor that will entertain some and sour others as the fisherman hams it up big time. The frogman's okay, but much less ominous. They do a good job of hiding the seams and amateur look to the beast, though through shadow and close angles. Bone Jangles director Bret DeJager delivers A Hopkinsville Encounter, a tale of the Hopkinsville Goblins. It's a lighthearted tale that serves as a continuation of the night a group of goblins from outer space allegedly attacked a farm. Years later, one of the members of the family still lives on the property and loves him some Halloween. One night, the goblins come back, and the vibe is more of a Gremlins feel than anything else. Most of the suspense comes from darting a camera around the room and having the goblins scurry off screen from the light. Simple concept, decent-looking little goblins, though. Circus of the Dead's Billy Bloody Bill Pond unleashes chupacabra death machines. Though I love the premise of having a bunch of drug dealers get rid of their least effective workers in a match where they must outrun a pair of snarling and rabid chupacabras, this one had a bare minimum of a story and was over all too quickly. I love the chupa effects, and the carnage they cause is pretty splattery. I just wanted more story to this one. Aliens are the cryptid du jour in Infectious by Max Groan. This was one of the few segments that felt fully formed. Not only did it have a great sense of humor and cynically nostalgic tone, but the monster was a fun, rubbery alien guy that dissolves skin with its touch. This one was probably my favorite story of the bunch. The director of The Barn 1 and 2, Justin M. Seaman, tackles the Beast of Baldenborough, one of the better ones simply because of the balance between humor and horror. The Beast once again looks great, though we only see bits and pieces of it, and the characters are quite likable, making me feel a little invested about their survival. Imagine that. I can appreciate the extra time and energy put into this anthology to tie it all together. If anything, it feels as if it were made by a bunch of friends in the industry who are happy to work together and support each other's projects rather than cryptids just being a grab bag of random talent. Joe Bob Briggs basically plays himself, but at least gives his thoughts on each tale. Shocker, they're mostly positive. As for the anthology as a whole, I feel that the biggest thing all of them are lacking is an attention to story. Most of them simply have people doing what they do and then running into a cryptid, and then either they kill it or it kills them, with the bulk of these all too shorts ending before the last act even happens. The effects were really good though. While this is one of my favorite subjects, Cryptids is not one of my favorite anthologies. Great effects can only go so far. Finally, we have Lore. It's streaming on Tubi from Kaleidoscope Home Entertainment. It's directed by James Bush, Patrick Michael Ryder, and Greg Johnson. It's written by James Bush, Christine Barber-Ryder, Patrick Michael Ryder, and Greg Johnson. A group of adrenaline junkies who frequent haunts, escape rooms, and other scare attractions get together on a haunted camping trip with a tour guide, played by Richard Brakey, guiding them through a night of scares as all of them tell spooky tales around the campfire. Anthologies seem to be made of two kinds these days. One of them is a collection of short films glommed together with a wraparound segment that barely has any kind of similar theme. And then there are the anthologies that do follow the same format and seem to have some kind of link between the stories. I prefer the latter, as it seems more time and energy was used on the construction of the film. Lore feels a little like both, as it seems like all three of the filmmakers involved worked together on this project, but each produced vastly different stories from one another. Now, I don't want the same story told to me every time, but the connection between these segments are loose to say the least. The wraparound is decent, mainly because it's got Richard Brakey, who makes any film he's in better for him being there. The campers are okay, though they seem to be more interesting in ripping on each other than really spending time together. So it doesn't make any of them very likable characters. Segment 1 is called Shadows. It begins with a man running from a pair of thugs who takes refuge in a warehouse haunted by a black demon. This predictable sequence may not have been the scariest, but the acting is top-notch and makes it very watchable. I also like the extra effort put into the split-second-like demon in the warehouse. James Bush, known for the Predator Dark Ages fan film and Cannibals and Carpet Fitters, wrote and directed this one. In segment 2, called The Hidden Woman, a mother and child inherit a home from an old woman, a former ballet dancer who haunts the halls. This one is rather breezy, but it does feature a cool-looking ghost who appears to be walking backwards and then filmed forwards to have an uncanny look to the way she moves. This one could have used some kind of explanation as to why the ghost is so cranky to the new inhabitants of the house, other than simply being a creepy ghost. Some motivation or backstory would have helped. It ends with a jump scare, which feels like a cheat instead of coming to a real resolution, but goes in line with the fact that this is a story being told around a campfire. Writer-director Patrick Michael Ryder is responsible for this one, along with his partner, Christine Barber-Ryder. Now, segment 3, entitled Cross Your Heart, is where the film gets rolling, as a night of celebrating the anniversary of a couple turns into a bloodbath full of witchy and folksy goodness. I loved pretty much everything about this one, which involved some wonderful edits and camera angles, and a truly shocking turn or two of events. This segment had teeth, and is my favorite of the bunch by short filmmaker Greg Johnson. Segment 4, called The Keychain Man, is from the collaboration between Patrick Michael Ryder, Christine Barber-Ryder, and James Bush. It's a fun little slasher workplace maniac film where a verbally abused giant who works in a movie theater snaps and kills his boss, and then locks the few people in the theater inside for some stalk and slash. This one has some nice and gory kills involving various equipment you'd find in a theater, and had some well-timed comical beats. And while the killer's look feels like a cross between Leatherface and Scream, it still makes for an ominous little slasher short. Patrick Michael Ryder, Christine Barber-Ryder, and James Bush also work together on the wraparound, which doesn't so much as tell a story, but it sets the mood nicely. While the first two were a little tepid, lore really picks up steam in the second half with the last two tales. I recommend this anthology simply for the final two wicked little segments. Now let's use the anthologies we have here, cut it to bits, and make the perfect anthology. First, I would swipe the Shadmock from the Monster Club, since it was filled with fun ideas. Then, how about we So Infectious by Matt Groan from CRYPTIDS, which is a fun mix of nostalgia and a wonderful little gore fest. Then we can pause for a nice little musical number from the Monster Club from Night called The Stripper, with the memorable stripping skeleton sequence. Finally, we'll end up with a bang and graft on Greg Johnson's Cross Your Heart from Lore, which is full of folk horror, oddness, gore, a little bit of dark humor, and technically looks great. As a wraparound, I'd use the one from Lore, since it features the fantastic Richard Brakey as our creepy tour guide. And I think, yes, that puts the best parts together of each of these anthologies, making the perfect anthology. What do you think? Until next time, I'll be toiling in my lab. Toil, toil, toil. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're inside that